The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today with Agiles. Our presenter today is Kit Michelson. She works actively in the North American market and beyond as the Director of International Partnering. She has over 8 years of industry experience that accidentally sent her from the west coast of USA to agilesWorkflow company headquarters in Hamburg, Germany. When not learning German, some would argue successfully or unsuccessfully, she focuses her energy on making sure the people she works with get a straightforward and excellent experience by providing relevant and insightful information about agilesWorkflow. I just want to remind everyone that while you are an attendee and your microphone is muted, we can always accept questions that are typed into the question box, so I'll be monitoring that. And with that, Kip, I will hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Today we're going to be taking a look at agilesWorkflow and actually just at a higher level your business processes and maybe some creative or new and interesting ways to incorporate different ways of handling that. So as Abby said, I am located over in Germany, but we're very active in the U.S. market with partners like ABC Computers. And today we're going to start high level and continue just to break it down. The main goal of this session is, in my opinion, for you guys to walk away with a really good understanding of some options in terms of how to handle your business processes. Obviously, much of the focus will be on agilesWorkflow, so we'll start out by discussing at a high level what it is agilesWorkflow is. From there, we'll dig down into the different types of workflows. So this is going to be active ways some of our current customers are using the system. Then we'll log right into the database and get a feel for what Agiles would be like from a user perspective and kind of how it interacts with NAV, which most of you are likely familiar with, and then we can wrap things up. So as mentioned, I know you guys are muted, but I do encourage questions. I always think the most relevant time to handle them are when we're discussing a certain topic. So I've told Abby she is more than welcome to interrupt me as necessary. So there's a lot of different things that you as a customer probably say at some point along the line with your database that you're in a lot of the time. So some of the things that we hear sometimes are, why can't NAV notify me when a particular event happens? Or how can I incorporate approvals on a certain area? Or maybe how can NAV handle this process? How can it handle my real business process, not just a general templated process? Also, I've heard customers say, I really need fields to be mandatory, or I just want a workflow tool. All businesses tend to be process-based in some way, shape, or form. There's just a lot of different things that people can end up needing and wanting to get the most out of their system. So I'm just going to break down and show you how agilesWorkflow can help in every single one of these areas. So every organization has some key processes and specific ways they run things. Some of the main areas in NAV could be to handle a new customer process. What happens when you do put that new customer in a system? Or maybe just your sales order process. Every company already has a way they do it, but maybe it's not all tracked step by step in the system. Another big one is going to be in the financial area around some purchase order approvals. What happens when you do need to process that new order in the system? So they all look good in paper, but when push comes to shove, it can start to get a little bit confusing. One step needs to go back and be fixed when it's not done right, and it doesn't always necessarily translate super well right into a database. So what are we going to do to get these business processes that sometimes overlap and loop back on top of each other better managed right inside of NAV? And that's through workflow. So how are we going to organize it? We're going to take this system you're already using, NAV, and just add some structures and rules with agilesWorkflow. So just kind of bridging the gap, and a couple critical areas we'd be able to do that. As for starters, you can now manage and simplify your work based specifically on your business needs. So you can add status levels so you can make sure more important work will get done first. Prioritize work. You can also automate repetitive things. Perhaps your payment terms are always the same when you put in a new vendor. Have the system just work for you and automatically do those things. All of this management and simplification is then going to be broken down and passed right inside of NAV. This can be across companies, even departments, and between different employees and teams right inside of your system. So I keep saying that it can work exactly the way you need it to be. We're aware that all businesses have different requirements and processes. So agilesWorkflow is actually seamlessly integrated. All this means is it's going to work anywhere on your system. Once it's implemented into that database, you're then able to build processes on any part of your system. So that means, of course, standard NAV, but also maybe other customizations you're using, as well as add-on solutions. As far as Agilis is concerned, it doesn't matter where you want to build those business processes or set critical notifications. So anywhere in NAV, it's going to work. You're not limited. It can also help with reducing customizations. So everyone wants an app to work the way they need it to work. And oftentimes in the past, some of this was done through heavy customization in the back end of the database. With Agilis, you're actually making these designs right in the user interface. So that means maybe you want to make a change to your workflow, and you can do that just by updating an existing workflow instead of going in and investing into timely and sometimes costly customizations. You get that change right when you need it. And then lastly, it can help reduce training. I'll let the system speak for itself, but it's really going to enhance the usability of that Windows client. So we've talked about guidance on the last slide, but also I want to get it into control. This kind of goes back to that I want slide a little bit. You're getting more control of the optimization of your system. So you make sure and have the peace of mind of knowing that your business processes are followed according to your business rules. The next thing you have is oversight. So all of your business processes are now stored as a part of your standard NAV. You have real metrics on the efficiency of your employees' productivity or how quickly your processes get done. Agilis works with those add-on products like I worked before. Not sure what people use for reporting, but any SQL-based reporting tool you're able to use to pull out the information that Agilis has stored. So how quickly you get a new shipment sent out. If you have a workflow for that, that information is now NAV and you can pull the information out. So those synergies with anything else you're using can give you that complete solution. Next, it gives a lot of control of overhaul. So with Agilis, you're forced to put your processes as you want them right into NAV. So this sometimes allows you to see better ways to change your processes to be more efficient. You've already gone through and logically agreed as an organization how your processes work, but now you can possibly see better ways to make those processes more efficient. I always say, just because it's how you've always done it, doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way. And I know change can be scary, so use that logic of Agilis to kind of approach it with a strategy that you know will make you more efficient. And then lastly, a small one that brings a lot of value, you get control of your operations. So you have something sitting in the back of your system proactively managing all the changes you make inside of NAV. This way you can make sure to prevent critical issues from happening before they become critical. So that's a high level. Let's break down into the types of workflows. We start out with business notifications, and then we move into a whole business workflow. A business notification, again, can be anywhere. So a good example is stock falling below reorder point, but it's certainly not limited there. What happens is Agilus is always looking to see if a change in your system put in by any user has triggered a workflow. And if it has, it will tell the person and prompt them immediately what to do and how to do it. So these notifications go out either as a task prompted right inside NAV, or it can also go as an email. So a customer will get an email that looks a bit like this and tell them, you need to order more of this item. It gives them a link that will take them back into the database for the purchasing manager to order more of that item. Again, it's that flexibility. You can put these anywhere. It really just comes down to what you want out of your system. So some of the common areas, it's big for credit limit control. Maybe you want to stay more on top of your AR so that you don't have to block big accounts that somehow get past due. You can do that. Another good thing is for shipment tracking. I know there are certain customers that have contracts that cause them to pay a fee if a shipment is delayed by X amount of days. You can make sure you have that visibility and therefore save a lot of money in those shipment fees. So anywhere you might want it, good for when sales campaigns expire, but this is just to get you thinking. So notifications can be quite simple. But now I'm going to talk more specifically about a new customer workflow. Most people are using master records in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's vendors, maybe it's items. But let's break down what happens when I put a new customer in the system. We have all our steps, but let's turn it into an Agilus workflow right inside our database. Excuse me. The first thing that's going to happen is a new customer will be entered in the database. Again, agilesWorkflow is always looking to see if that change in NAV has triggered a workflow. In this particular example, we want to make it a default workflow. So this means anytime a new customer goes in the system, we're going to have them follow this series of steps as defined by us right away. So you could make this much more specific. You wouldn't need a default workflow. Perhaps you're just concerned with your Canadian customers because of tax laws. You can break down the condition as much as you want to be. So maybe it's only for your junior level employees that you want to spot check their work. Whatever that might be, you can make the conditions as general, like this example, to as very specific and refined as you want for a very certain type of your customer base. So the first thing that's going to happen goes back to that automation. Agilus will just block the customer from the get-go. This ensures you don't have someone maybe post a purchase order against this record until you're ready. So we can require mandatory fields and follow that up by attaching a credit application. So with Agilus, you are getting light level document storage. Next, you can have someone double check that work, examine a credit application, and then bring a manager in for approval. So this is another instance you can bring those approvals into effect in your system. We'll automatically unblock the record as soon as that happens, and then go ahead and send an engagement letter out. Let's just get in the system and look at it. So I'm logged into NAV 2013 R2 database as a workflow administrator. So this is going to be a power user of workflow. Not everybody would have all of this information. One thing everybody does have is the My To Do activities. Excuse me. So this is specific to my user. It's telling me exactly what to do and when to do it. I can see all my open work, as well as it broken down by my different status levels. I can come and see immediately that I have one overdue task and just drill down. So we've kept it as much like standard NAV as possible. It shows me why this is overdue. You get this information for every one of your accounts based on the status level, but I can see that I needed to attach my product specification. I have my description for an item that went in the system. This item's a bicycle, and the action is going to be document storage. Each one of these tasks can then be assigned to a team member or a salesperson. When you do assign an activity to a team member, it means that as soon as one person closes that task, it's going to be closed for all the team members. I then have the start and end date. So this is how the system knows that it's overdue. The end date to have this done was the 17th, and it's now the 22nd. Also great for managers to keep an eye on things. If something does change status levels, so possibly it goes from critical to overdue, you can have notifications go out to a manager saying, hey, this employee has a late task. The next thing you have on top of that is My Workflows. So the My To-Dos is going to be work relevant to a user. But the My Workflows is an entire snapshot of what's going on. I can see right here all the workflows that are important to me. Maybe it's because I have an active role in the workflow. Maybe it's because I'm a manager. Whatever the case, I can see and track what's going on. I also have a snapshot of my teams right here. So I can see right away who has more work, who's getting stuff done on time, and that kind of stuff. So the left side is all user specific, important relevant information, or the right side rather, and the left side here is going to be a system-wide snapshot. As I said, I'm going to be logged in as a workflow administrator, so I can also see from a system-wide perspective everything that's going on and why. All my open tasks again like before, and then it broken down by those status levels. I get the same statistic for my workflows as well. So let's just go ahead and put a new customer in the system. So a lot of users don't necessarily know that they're using agilesWorkflow. Again, it's just a natural extension to NAV. So I can just put a name and let's give them a credit limit. And everything looks good to me. So as you may remember, we said this is a default workflow. So that means anytime a new customer goes in the system, it's going to kick off that process we took a look at in PowerPoint. So users don't have to worry about things falling through the cracks. If I put all my information in correct, it's not going to prompt me to do the work. It doesn't become repetitive or redundant for you. It's just kind of a good backup for that day maybe somebody's in a rush or maybe when somebody's on holiday. And then you don't have to have the worry that something gets done incorrectly during that time. So I log back in and I see I have an extra now to do. So that means that the first activity of this particular workflow is assigned to the user, again, that I'm logged in as. Here at the top of the list, I can see right away that I need to check mandatory fields for ABC computers. So the to-do type is going to be the action your user is doing to complete a task. There's 5 types in total that a user is going to have to become familiar with when they're learning the system. It's given to my user MD. And up here at the top, I have a couple different options. So just like NAV, you can always drill down to more information. Show source is going to bring me to the customer card of the record I'm referencing. That way I can go and see my information, double check what's going on, just have it at my fingertips. There we go. So I see all the information here. So again, Achilles always takes you right to that information. So if you ever think, what am I doing and why am I doing it, you just click Show Source and it prompts you to what you're working on. Another thing it's going to do is take a look at the expanded view of the workflow. How am I linked into this workflow? As we saw before, I'm responsible for the first task. Okay, so let me tend to my work, and I can do that just right here off this screen. The 4 other types of to-dos are automatically grayed out. Don't have to worry about the confusion there. And then we can just go ahead and examine fields. So I can see straight away that I left off my invoicing tab with all my posting groups. There's a couple things to do. Edit is kind of the same thing as show source. It brings you back to the record. Maybe a new employee wants to see why they left it off, and they can come in here and say, okay, let's put my posting group in. Oftentimes, if this was just left off as an oversight, people don't necessarily want to go get that information right there. So you can also just do it as a direct import right here. I could write it, but again, I could also I have the same functionality of that cell lookup where I can come and say, okay, this is an EU customer, and everything looks good. So as I close that out, the system is going to remove this activity from my list. It's no longer open to do, and I can tend to my other work. So the Rule Center is already really good at taking relevant work to a particular user and telling them what to do. A purchasing manager has all stuff that's used to purchasing. It's a great system and it's a great philosophy and approach to help users. But you can take it one step further and give them that guidance and give them that control, and also the peace of mind of knowing your work is done the way your business needs it to be done. So far, this is all quite straightforward. One follows the next. And let's just go in here and work off my workflow from my customer list. I have a lot of new open customers. Scroll down to the bottom. It's going to be the most recent one entered. I'm going to go ahead and go back into my expanded view. So here we can see right away, we always have that transparency and visibility of what's going on with my process and why. So I need to attach the credit application. So I'm going to actually pull open the card for this example. It's the same as working off your product stack, but it gives you more detailed information. So I'm just going to come in here and store documents. This is typically going to be maybe a folder on a server. We'll allow it for this session. And you're just directing it to that credit application. The to-do is now complete. It's been done. And as I step up, step back, and come back into my workflow, I see it's automatically been updated. So you always know what's going on in my process. It can also be very helpful for historical reasons. Perhaps you want to go back and look when something was finished and by whom. I mentioned that ability to sync it with your reporting tool. This is the information I meant to store. You know that Mary completed this task at a specific time. So it helps you get answers to some situations that might become a little bit more complex than they typically should. So the next thing I'm going to do is talk about a manual completion. So we've done the first 2 steps. We've done a field examination and we've also stored documents, but I see a little arrow right here. What's going on right now is we have multiple things happening in an organization at the same time. So this just means we need to have our finance team review dimension and posting groups. At the same time, my accounts team does a background check, while my warehouse team is setting up shipping fields. Processes don't always follow one after the other like the first step, and in this way you can have multiple things happening at the same time and still bring them back to that same close point of getting an approval. So the first two tasks we looked at are just based off of a change in an AV. Is a field filled out? Is a document connected that needs to be? But businesses have to do things that aren't just read right inside of NAV, but they still want that accountability and they want to make sure that it gets done. So that's where a manual completion can give you a lot of power to still include those things happening outside the system. And essentially all you're doing is just coming in and acknowledging that yes, that work has been done. So I think we've gone through a majority of the new customer workflow, but what I want to do is talk about some of the more advanced ways you can incorporate your processes and kind of meet your customer needs. We'll just jump back into here shortly. We did look at the customer, and again, just want you to leave thinking about all the different ways that this could handle your process and your need. The customer is just an example. You're not limited in any way, shape, or form. And master records on a new implementation, it's going to be about 40% of what a typical customer implements is some type of master record workflow or workflows. So some of the more advanced functionalities, we do have conditional responsibility. So this just is determining who's responsible for a task. A workflow can split, go a different way, and have a certain team member handle something. So maybe you have a rep that handles your West Coast accounts versus your East Coast accounts. You can split the work that way. Next thing we have is a to-do group. We did look at it in the new customer example, but you can just have multiple tasks happening at the same time. You don't even need to have information go into the system to start a workflow. You can also simply start a workflow, a to-do or a workflow based on a date field. So maybe 3 days before end of quarter, you want to have people go in and run the correct revenue reports, really aggressively collect on invoices that are over 21 days old. Whatever it might be, you can do that right here. So a big part of workflow is making those decisions. It's oftentimes in the financial area, so maybe for your credit memos, before you issue them, you want to get an approval. Or before a purchase order gets posted, you want to block that until a manager of the department approves that the order can go through. In the case that a workflow or a decision does need to get rejected, you can't just have it hang out without any follow-up. What you can do is loop the workflow back to the step it was done incorrectly. Outside of finances, the other area this is commonly used is going to be for quality control of some sort. Perhaps you're building a bicycle and the bicycle seat was not done correctly. You can send that task back to the person who was supposed to do the bicycle seat and have them correct their work. So approvals can get quite comprehensive with the agilesWorkflow. A lot of times there's different people in an organization that have the authority to approve things up to a certain level. So here we're going to look at a purchase order work approval. And the condition is not default like the customer workflow, but it's going to be anytime a purchase order goes in for over $1,000. So these approvals can be done at line level as well. So it's not just based on the total value. And what happens when a purchase order goes in for over $1,000, it's going to go to the sales manager. The sales manager can then approve anything up to $25,000. From $25,000 to $50,000, we need to bring the CFO in, and anything above $50,000, the managing director will come in. So this doesn't need to be just about the amount. Maybe it's the type of item that you're ordering. Maybe it's a special item, and that's when you bring approvals in. There's so many different ways to structure your approvals. So just think about the areas that you want to make sure that someone comes in, double checks work, and approves it to happen. Because chances are you can likely manage it in some way here with Agilus. So from a user perspective, again, it's just going to feel for a purchaser or whoever is the one filling this out like standard NAV once again, and it's just giving you that little bit extra control. So we can decide who we want to buy from. And let's just buy an item. Looks like I'll use my lookup functionality. Let's get a bicycle or a touring bicycle.
Kip, I do have a question for you.
Sure.
Which version of NAV is agilesWorkflow compatible with?
Yeah, we're currently supporting the 2 most current releases of NAV. So this new version and everything we've shown today works with NAV 2009 R2 and anything NAV 2013 and NAV 2013 R2. Okay, so I've put a purchase order in the system for 5 bicycles, and as you may remember, we made this for over $1,000. So what's always happening once you've implemented Agilus and made it a part of your system? Agilus is always just going to be that second set of eyes that's looking and saying, has this change in NAV triggered a workflow condition? Is there follow-up work? Does someone need to be notified? If it has, then you can start these workflows. So with that, I can log back into my Role Center and see again that I have a new now to do. So because I'm the administrator user, it makes sense that I would make an approval on a purchase order. And the most recent one entered was that same one. Again, you always have that show source. You're able to jump around in NAV just as you normally would. When you determine the fields that you want a mandatory, that's just NAV filtering. So it's information that people who've been using NAV for a while might already feel comfortable with. So making a decision, again, the 4 areas are grayed out that we don't need, and we just come in and can either approve or reject that. I'll go ahead and approve it. So all approvals would look like this. The decision values are actually user defined. I have some instances that a customer needs to include a maybe. It still confuses me a little bit, but that does happen in some businesses. And it will instantly remove itself from my task. So this would be an approval for anything, to approve a new item to go to stock. Another common area to incorporate workflows can also be for an HR process. There are certain things that need to happen when a new employee joins a team. Validate their key card, make sure that you have all of their W-2 and banking information. Whatever that might be can now be managed right here in your system, so you make sure that things don't get left out. So there's a lot of different areas so that you can have these workflows, and if you want to see the open workflows in your system, you can just come in right here to my templates. So this is just an indication of all the workflows I actually have in my system. So they cover a variety of areas, from your customer to your vendor to just tracking your different accounting periods. Whatever it might be, you can set these processes and send instant notifications out for your users. So we do have 16, actually now 17, pre-written business scenarios that are available. They're kind of the baseline for what we use to get people comfortable with the system and getting up to speed in that regard. So with Agilus, you are able to import and export workflows through an Excel import. So some of these might be close to what you need. I typically say they're going to be about 70% there because you still have to identify which employee of your team would need something. But that's also available for customers to kind of start to learn the system a bit. So just to wrap up about some of the things we've talked about today, that hopefully you walk away seeing how it can happen inside NAV. With Agilus, you can get more control. So the first step is you're getting your business processes very clearly defined and documented. And then you're using the technology you already have, which is NAV, to implement it right into that user interface. You make sure your business processes are followed the first time the right way. And you are getting that immediate awareness of things when they happen. Users aren't going and digging and looking for past due invoices or where the stock count is on particular items. You get that information anywhere. You're also getting a lot of insight into the system. So you get a clear view of upcoming work and how it's broken down between your different employees and teams. You're also able to track your process history. So this is great, again, if you want to incorporate it with maybe one of your reporting tools, and can be very helpful for auditing purposes or just to have a way to double check work. And it can also help analyze the performance and productivity of your different teams, processes, and employees. Along with that, you can improve the way you do your business today. I know there's never enough time in a day, so potentially saving an hour a week can be big, especially if that's for 10 different employees. That's almost a full working day you're going to get. You're going to see maybe some of the reasons that you do have some delays in certain areas of your business, and have an easy, straightforward way to make changes and improve that. So again, you can manage this change right in the user interface through setup, through an adjustment to an existing process, not going in and doing heavy development. And with that, hopefully this makes all users happy. There's increased productivity. So employees are guided through their work and told what to do. It can also be good if somebody's new to NAV or there's an upgrade and you're getting used to the new interface, to have that extra level of guidance and really cut down on your training time. Overall, it's just helping reduce your mistakes, delays, and problems, and letting your managers focus on more important issues that really require them to be strategic, not focusing on micromanagement. And then lastly, with Agilus, you can accelerate your processes. So you can implement those status levels and make sure the most important work or more critical work is done first. That way people aren't jumping around the database, putting off the things that maybe they enjoy less in their day. You're also getting those automatic reminders, and that is for a user that's a heavy NAV user or for somebody who's not. You're able to get those emails on anything that's happening in your system. So right away you can tend to that in your business. And instead of chasing paper trails and sending multiple emails, the system is just passing tasks for you right there in that interface. So that was the main stuff, to start at a high level and break it down based on some processes. Are there any questions at this point based on how the system can work or something specific to your need?
So far, Kip, I
guess
don't
with
have
everyone
anything.
right? Okay.
If anybody has any final questions, now's the time. Otherwise, I think we're probably set. Yep. Didn't get anything here, Kip, so it looks like you explained rather well. We don't have any questions.
Well, good stuff. And if there is any follow-up or certain things that come up to follow it, it's easy to track me down and get clarification or have a question that hits you over lunch answered. So I really appreciate the time of everyone who was able to join today. Hopefully you kind of have some ideas on different things you could accomplish with your NAB system and the help of agilesWorkflow. So thanks to everybody.
And thank you, Kip, for your presentation. And just so everyone knows, the recording of this webinar will be up on abccomputers.com if you want to be able to refer back and watch it again. Thanks, everyone. Have a great morning.